Okay, welcome everyone to Business Club. Our very special guest today is Bob Kittell. Bob Kittell is an internationally renowned speaker, and he's done some really interesting work on memory, and he's spoken to audiences of tens of thousands on how to improve your memory, and he's also done a lot of speaking on mental health. Now, I recently saw Bob speaking here in Ottawa as part of Kyle's Entrepreneurs event, and Bob was talking about several aspects of mental health and memory, and which was showing us how to actually memorize things. So that was really interesting. So I wanted to give a huge welcome to Bob Kittell, and great to have you with us today.
Well, thank you. It's a total blast.
Okay, excellent. So Bob, I wanted to touch upon you had put this post up recently. I thought that was really interesting, and it was about there's a girl that held up a sign saying that the world is a better place with you in it. And what I just found out this morning was that was actually your daughter that was doing that. So tell us a little bit about what that was all about.
Well, what's interesting is my daughter, like myself, actually, I'd like to start with the day she said, "Dad, what's a blessing?" I go, "What do you mean?" She goes, "Dad, people only think they're blessed when something good happens. Dad, the greatest thing that ever happened to you and me was we went through massive depression and went into that darkness." She goes, "Dad, I've already saved two of my friends' lives." So she's gone through that yuck that's rampant right now with all the stuff going on in the world. So she decided to get a sign, and "The world is better with you in it," and stand on a street corner. And I said, "Well, why did you do that?" She goes, "Well, I wanted to face my fear. I was anxious, and so I thought of something that would be more anxious. So I leaned into my fear. I was there for 5 minutes, and then I was there for 15 minutes, and I finally could stand there for an hour or two." The reason I keep doing it, Dad, is actually just yesterday, she said a police officer stopped and gave her a bottle of water while she was standing on that street corner. Another person stopped and said, "Why are you doing this?" She goes, "Because I don't want people to end their lives." And he says, "Keep doing what you're doing." One of our co-workers ended his life yesterday. We need messages like this. Another friend called me out of the blue who also deals with depression. And she said, "You tell your daughter she made my entire week by doing that." So she became part of the solution. She's out there doing something to try to, calm down the world.
No, that's amazing. And yeah, go ahead.
One last thing. I just told her, I said, "You just became one of my heroes."
That's amazing. And we are living in extraordinary times right now, Bob, and a lot of people are feeling a lot of anxiety and and having mental health challenges. And and south of the border, where you are at too, there's a lot of people going through a rough time financially as well, because they've either lost their jobs or they're having difficult getting by. And what are your thoughts on this whole situation that we're in with the COVID-19 pandemic, and now we're getting the sort of the Black Lives Matter on top of that, and it just seems like quite a challenging time right now.
Yeah, it is really interesting. In fact, even I had 3 years of no anxiety, no depression at all. And, about the beginning of all this, subconsciously, whatever, I started having anxiety myself. And I went, "Oh, that's certainly interesting. I've got anxiety again." So, I tell everybody, if it's more than you can handle, go find a professional to help you. Don't suffer silently. Let someone help you. I had to go through that the first time. I mean, I've been standing on these stages with, thousands of people out there, and nobody knew I was depressed and had low self-esteem and was insecure. And I finally just went, you know what, with panic attacks hitting me back in 2011, I just said, I need help. And so that's the first step. Don't suffer silently, because it'll just wash over you.
Yeah, and it's really interesting too. And Bob, when I heard your talk, and you were saying about how you used to yell during one of your big talks in front of thousands of people, and you couldn't figure out what you would leave after you leave the stage. You would just have these terrible feelings of depression, anxiety, and until you finally had a talk with someone and set you on a new path. And I was wondering if you could sort of share your story on how you kind of eventually discovered and saw the light, and how someone helped change your life for the better.
Well, I got to the point where I just go, I know why people end their lives. It's not to end their lives, it's to end the pain. And I remember just going, it's 3 o'clock. How am I going to last till 4? I mean, it was a really, really tough place to be. And my doctor even told me, he says, Bob, your body can't handle this. The elevated cortisol that hits your body when you're going through this, I was starting to have an arrhythmia. My heart was beating funny. He said, anyway, it's not good for you physiologically either. So I finally found a doctor who had me face my pain. He had, instead of just talking about it, he would actually get me really angry. And anger is a secondary emotion covering pain. And I didn't know that. I thought, oh, anger is bad. And I would suppress it and just never face it and just try to push it down. So he got me to feel the anger. And I found childhood suppressed memories that I needed to face that I didn't face at the time because, you know, being a little kid, I didn't know any better. So if my mother left me at somebody's house that I didn't know, the little boy hated his mother, but you know, I loved my mother as an adult, but the little 3-year-old, you know, hated his mother. So I had to go through that anger and that pain and the sobbing. And it was like 8 months of that. But a professional had to help me get to that place where I could do that. And what's interesting, I spoke for the United States Air Force at one of the air bases on this entire subject to all of the psychologists and psychiatrists before I talked to the 1,400 airmen. And they said, pal, you're right on. We got to handle our childhood trauma, and then we learned how to get connected to others, connected to ourselves, connected to nature. And I mean, that's a long story short.
Yes, I remember the story you were talking about even as a child, because you used to play with baby birds, right? And one thing that you had never realized the impact of something that had happened with the baby birds. And would you mind elaborating on that that story for us?
Yeah, one of the memories I found was when I was 11. First of all, when I was 11 years old, I got a picture of me, you know, feeding a baby robin. And when I was in high school on the football team, in the spring, I would go find a baby robin. I'd take it out of its nest and I would help raise the bird until it flew away. Every 20 minutes, in fact, I would sneak it into school in my sweater. And the teachers just kind of went along with it, and they were okay with it. And back in 2011, when I was going through my real yuck, I had over 20 baby birds in my backyard that had to be fed every 20 minutes. And I would pay somebody $50 to $100 a day to take care of them when I was out on the road speaking. And I go, well, that's a little obsessive, don't you think? But I didn't know what obsession was back then. Well, I found the memory of me as a 5-year-old, and I was trying to teach a baby bird how to fly. And I'd throw it up and it'd drop. And I go, no, let me explain this to you as a 5-year-old, right? And then I'd move its little wings. I go, this is how it works. And I'd throw it up and it'd drop. And then I got really mad at the bird. I threw it at the ground and killed it. And I went, stupid bird. When I found that memory as a 50 plus year old, I mean, I sobbed for like 4 hours over that little baby bird until my memory, my brain kind of processed it till it was like the baby bird said, hey, you were just 5 years old. It's okay. I'm all right. And a couple of years later, my daughter says, hey, Dad, have you noticed for the first time in a couple of years, you have not raised one baby bird? So the childhood trauma had caused like a savior behavior in me where I didn't have to raise baby birds anymore.
Wow, that's quite a fascinating story. And so that person, that psychologist, then turned you around, and then you started feeling better about life in general. And I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about, because you've done a lot of speaking tours, and you're speaking with a lot of very successful people. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about your work as a public speaker, and are you still doing that today?
Well,
obviously not in a public forum, but I mean, with as far as like, I mean, a lot of us are doing stuff on Zoom or media, but also there's limited with obviously the pandemic. But is that still part of your life when life is back to normal?
I don't know what normal is going to look like. Yeah, I watched all of my speaking completely disappear because, you know, public gatherings disappeared. I've got only one thing on the books for maybe in Idaho, speaking to a bunch of teachers, because I like to speak to schools. I speak to teachers, and I usually do that no charge, just to, you know, kind of give back. Professional speaking, you know, who knows? It just completely disappeared. So Yeah, I might be retiring from the speaking world. Every once in a while I get to do this, get to speak online or with a Zoom meeting. But yeah, it's the world has completely changed, at least for me, and I don't know what it's going to look like on the other side of this.
No, I wanted to ask, I was kind of interesting because I actually saw a picture of you, a video of you applauding as JT Fox was going up, because he's one of these business coaches that I've done some work with as well. And I was wondering, is with speaking events, is there like a psychology sort of strategy with the audience that, say, the head speaker would be using to try to get people to sign on to their program, sort of psychology where they get everyone to raise their hands? I've heard the same thing even with Tony Robbins. They sort of get everyone to raise their hand in agreement. And it's almost like if someone doesn't raise their hand, they sort of get peer pressured into agreement. And it's like a psychology, say, do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? And then buy into the program. Is there like a lot of like that going behind the scenes with these speaking events? Like, is there kind of like an art and science to inviting people out to a free program and then signing up to a coaching program? Is that usually what the case for most of these speaking tours?
I've seen that happen. I don't know what the psychology is. I mean, somebody was saying you're really good at connecting with a large audience, and it's like innate. But I do that. The best way to start a speech, there's 3 different ways you could. God, what are those 3 things? The one is to ask a question that they can all buy into. The second one is to a factoid. Tell them, 95% of people, whatever. And the best way to start a speech is to start with a story. So I used to go, hey, how many of you would like to expand the power of your minds? How many of you would like to do that without the use of drugs? How many of you would like to try without drugs and just see with drugs and just see what happens? So it's something to bring everybody in together.
Okay, no, that's really interesting. Now you've done a lot of work, free work, and I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about what that's all about, how people improve their memory, because that's a big thing that you teach, our memory exercises. And I remember coming to your talk, and you were actually walking us through like basically the process of visualization with words, and how you even teach college students how to memorize.
Well, what was really interesting is when I was going to college, I was talking to my brother about this yesterday. Me and my one brother worked our butts off, hours and hours and hours of studying to just get through. And we had another brother who just seemed like he never brought a book home, and he just remembered everything. And we're going, what's going on? So anyway, my memory was just, I had to work really hard, 30, 40 hours a week just to, get by. And one day I pick up a book on memory, and applying the principles of visualization in there, my GPA went from 3.0 to 3.8. And I went, how come everybody doesn't know this? So I thought, well, Zig Ziglar said, if you want to get experience, go do it for free. So I walked into an anatomy class on campus, and I said to the professor, hey, this is a tough class on memory. Can I talk to your students for about 5 minutes to see if they want to come to my free memory seminar tonight? So he let me do that. His whole class came, about 200 of them. He calls me 2 weeks later. He says, pal, you've created a problem. I said, what? He said, the class you taught just outperformed my other 2 classes and blew the curve. The other 2 classes are asking if you will come teach them too. So before I graduated, I taught 3,000 kids how to have a better memory. I graduated and I went, geez, I wonder if people will pay for this. And then I went to universities all over North America. And that was how I made my living for quite a while. That launched my career into speaking.
Yeah, okay, well, that's really interesting, Bob. And now I have 2 daughters, they're 6 and 9. And one thing that one of my biggest takeaways from your presentation was what when you talked about the concerns of too much screen time. And I was wondering if you could just share with us what you become aware of with screen time, and some of the strategies to avoid what those consequences are.
Yeah, my that daughter that I was telling you about earlier, she was the one who came up to me one day and says, Dad, would you get me a flip phone? And I said, why? She goes, I don't know why, but this smartphone gets me depressed and makes me anxious, and I just don't like it. So I started reading up on electronics, and I found out that the first president of Facebook said something like, how do we consume as much of your time and conscious attention as possible? And that means that we need to give you a little dopamine hit every once in a while. because someone liked or commented on a photo or a post or whatever. And that's going to get you to contribute more content, and that's going to get you more likes and comments. It's a social validation feedback loop, exactly the kind of thing that a hacker like myself would come up with, because we're exploiting a vulnerability in human psychology. And I went, are you kidding me? They did this on purpose? So I talked to these kids. I go, hey, are you using the tool, or is the tool using you? I mean, a hammer is a great tool, right? But if you're, sorry about that. But if you're hitting yourself in the head, that's not good for you. Hold on a second. I'm going to put this back on.
It's okay. We're getting a nice view of your kitchen there.
Well, you know, yeah, the counter, looking right at it. We've got this little, anyway. So here's some questions. Could you be addicted to your electronics? So there's some questions like, I'm anxious when I'm separated from my smartphone for an extended period of time. I engage in arguments with friends and families about electronics. When I'm not checking my smartphone, I fear missing out with what's going on. I lose track of time on my smartphone and electronics. Now, if you answered yes to any of those, you could be addicted to your electronics. But you know, there's one article that was in Psychology Today saying screen time is making kids moody, crazy, and lazy. 3 years ago, these kids looked at me like I was nuts talking about this. And I said, how many of you have heard that maybe smartphones aren't good for you? And almost all the hands go up, but they're kids. It's like handing our kids a bottle of liquor and saying, now control yourself. But those smartphones, the electronics, actually changes the chemistry of their brain. And we've got an entire generation of kids on Adderall and ADHD. And another really interesting thing about this is the blue light. And we've talked about that. So you notice I'm wearing blue light blocking glasses. And maybe somebody's going, well, what's blue light? Well, blue light is what comes off the screens, whether it's your computer, your TV, or your smartphone. God, there's a big electronics company down in Arizona. Oh, Intel Corporation down in Arizona. They took out all their screens of their entire company and replaced them with blue light filters on all of them, because if you're looking at blue light, it winds you up inside. It makes you more anxious. It's almost like, you know, drinking too many Red Bulls or energy drinks. And the one other point that I'd like to bring up is, you know, I ask these kids, I go, now it's not your parents' fault, but how many of you feel like your parents are ignoring you on a regular basis because they keep looking at their phones? Almost all the kids in schools raise their hands. So I'll have one of the kids walk up onto the stage and I go, pretend I'm your dad and ask me a question. So one of the kids walks up and says, hey, Dad. And I'm looking at my phone. Yeah, what? Well, wait a second. And Dad, hold on. Dad, what's going on? Anyway, after about 30 seconds of that, I go, how does that make you feel? And most of the girls say it makes me sad. Most of the boys will say something like, well, you're getting me mad. I want to hit you. So I said, well, walk up on stage again and do it again. So they walk up on stage, go, hey, Dad. And I go, wait a second. I put the cell phone down. I look him right in the eye and I go, hey, what's up? And I listen to him, looking him right in the eye. And after 30 seconds, I go, how does this feel? They go, it feels a lot better. I said, you know why? Because the most important person on the planet is the one who's right in front of you. And the kids will be going, oh. And when parents see that and they wake up, some parents just go, oh my gosh, and they change. And I've actually had parents go, I just guess I'm a bad parent. So it's just really interesting. If you're addicted to something, you don't want to hear that what you're doing isn't good for you.
No, that's really interesting. Thanks, Bob. Now, just on that subject, one of your talks, you actually give some techniques of networking, so building those face-to-face relationships. I was wondering if you could just break those down for us. I think you have three kind of suggestions you have for building a connection with someone at a networking event by having through a face-to-face interaction. I was wondering if you could share those with us.
I'm not sure what the three things are. Oh, CIQ. Yeah, well, one of the ways to, when you first meet a brand new person, there's this like barrier that is there. Like, what are they talking to me for? So I talk about compliment. So I'm go, wow, that is a great shirt you've got on. I really like that. And see, you smiled. And almost everybody does that. We were walking through the airport and me and a friend just practicing that, just doing it. And there was this big guy and he kind of looked mean. And I mean, he was huge and he had these gold chains on and, you had these little judgments that go on in your head. And I said, dude, those are the awesome looking sneakers I've ever seen. He goes, oh, thanks, man. A big smile, just like that. And then the second thing would be to introduce yourself like, hi, my name's Bob Kittell. So I paused in between the first name and last name. and then ask a question they can answer. It might be like, where's a real good place to eat around here? You know, if they're from that area. So it's a compliment, introduce, question, CIQ. I heard a speaker talk about that's secret from a pickup artist. So that's a great way to, you know, break it down and get a conversation going. And then I have another friend who wrote a book called Foster. So you take the word foster, F-O-S-T-E-R, questions like, where are you from? O is for occupation. S is where did you go to school? T is where do you like to travel, etc. And he wants you to get his own book before he doesn't want me to tell you all 5 of them. But anyway.
That's funny. That's really interesting. And so it's really interesting to hear your techniques and what you've learned over time. Now, you're obviously done a lot with speaking tours. And what would you say for those interested in getting into public speaking, into doing speaking tours, what would you like recommend to them? Like, what would be the first step to, because I think you're also actually engaged with, or at least at one time you were engaged with actual speaking tours that were going on. What would you say the first step? Because I know you've done some work also with Toastmasters. You were with Toastmasters for a while as well, which is a way of crafting your public speaking. But would you have any recommendations for someone who's interested in getting into doing, you know, speaking tours and what have you?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind, do you know Jimmy Stewart, the actor who did It's a Wonderful Life?
Yes, of course.
He spoke at our university, and I was in acting at the time as a minor. And he said, don't major in acting. Major in something that makes money, and then go be an actor. And if you're good enough, the money will come. Because, I mean, I have all these people go, I want to be you know, do what you did. And I'm kind of like an outlier. I mean, you take a million people, I'm the 2 or 3% that actually made a living my whole life doing speaking. But if you love speaking, first of all, when I heard Zig Ziglar speak, I could just go, I will do that one day. And I started preparing. So I turned the TV off. I never saw TV for 10 years. And I listened to one speaker after another, after another, after another. And I started learning their stories and how they interact with audiences, and just became familiar with it. So one would be just listen to speakers and see what are they doing that you like. And typically it's storytelling. You got to be a great storyteller to be a great speaker. The next thing would be to practice, like I did with the memory. I mean, or when I was going to church, I would always ask if I could teach the Sunday school class to the kids, and I would prepare all week, getting a bunch of stories put together that the kids would be interested in. So I prepared for, like, God, what is it? It was probably 6 or 7 years of preparation before I started actually making money with my my speaking. And then I lucked out that, you know, I was good at storytelling because I had a mother who was Italian and she was a good storyteller. And but I am an outlier. It's not something, just like actors, the ones that, you know, a small percentage of them make more money than the rest of them. But now I'm at a place in my life, I like doing it for free. So if you love doing it, just go down that road and you'll know if you're good, because one day people will start paying you for it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I also want to point out one other thing that you touched upon is I think one aspect of your success is that you took a big risk. You actually proactively went to talk to one of your professors and, hey, do you mind if I, you know, do this? And you know, like, put yourself out. You put yourself out there, basically. And I think that's, a lot of people are afraid to do that. They're gonna, like, you know, what will people think, but I think how do you think that aspect, like taking a risk or putting yourself out there, is important with becoming a success in the long term?
Yeah, that's kind of one of the things that there were two elements. I had somebody tell me that you're one of the most curious people I've ever met. You ask a lot of questions. And the other thing is, when a door opens, I always step through it. I use that example with pro football. You know, I was a cheerleader. I only made 1 out of 4 field goals when I was in college. And one day, one of the football players said, hey, the coach for Denver is down in the office, you know, the football office. Go talk to him. And instead of going, well, like, what is he going to think? And, you know, it takes a lot of energy to think for 2 people. So I went running down there. I opened up the door, and he's standing there surrounded by all these football players. And here's the opportunity, right? So I go, hey, you guys looking for a kicker? And the other football players looked at me like, are you nuts? And the coach goes, well, we've already signed 4 kickers for camp this year. Great. Well, what would it take to sign a 5th kicker? He goes, well, he'd have to be pretty darn good. And I said, look out that window. You see that field goal post out there? I can kick over the top of that from 50 yards. It'll go over the top of that. It'll clear the fence. It'll hit the cars. Then I'll kick off and right out of the end zone. And I went, that's pretty darn good, isn't it? And the guy just smiled. Now, what do you think is going to happen? He's just going to go, okay, get lost, kid. He said, all right, 2 o'clock. I'll give you 15 minutes. And he came out and he watched me kick. He signed me right on the spot. I went to camp. And then I tell everybody on the 3rd day, I got cut. But at least I tried. And I learned a lot in the process. To be growth-minded instead of, closed-minded, it's like I learned from every single experience. I look at everything and go, huh, what did I learn from that? That's really interesting. That's it. Fascinating. Oh, that's not the path that I'm going to go down. I mean, I tried some other occupations before speaking. They didn't work out, or I hated it. And I just went, well, at least now I know.
Yeah,
So
no, actually, Bob, so it's funny you mentioned that. I was actually a football player myself, and I actually was I did the kickoffs and kickoffs return and punting. So totally can relate. And it was interesting because I was, of course, our kicker in high school, but when I played varsity football, then it's like a whole other level. And it was, I was good, on the high school level, but when it comes to varsity level, it was more of like the 6 foot, whatever, guy who could kick the ball, 20 yards farther than me, or like could punt, and it takes it up the level. But you're right, to put yourself out there, that's the only way you can move forward with your career. So that's really that's really interesting story on that. So, well, at this point, I thought it'd be good we could maybe open up the floor. I know that Kyle is with us as well too, but maybe we can open up the floor to any questions or comments from anyone.
Unmute. There we go. Hey guys, how you doing? I just love listening to Bob talk. I've got to know him really well over the last couple years. And every time I talk to him, I learn something new. And I always give credit back to Bob for making and bringing entrepreneurs to what it is. Because when I met him, the day that I shook his hand was honestly the day that it changed my life, because I was that guy that would listen to the naysayers and I'd listen to everybody else. Why would you do that? You're an idiot. Why would you do this? Why would you do that? And that day that I met him, the buddy that I was with said, I told him I was going to go shake Bob's hand. And he said to me straight out, you're crazy. Like, who do you think you are that he's going to spend any time with you? And it was a risk. You put yourself out there, and it goes back to his football story. If I had never walked up and shook Bob's hand that day and introduced myself, we wouldn't be here today. Like, that's the reality of it. You would have never got to meet Bob. I would have never got to meet Bob. There's so many people's lives that Bob has touched just from that handshake that I got to make with them. And that's what makes it so special. Like, I'll love this relationship for the rest of my life. And Bob doesn't give himself enough credit because he's just so open, and it goes back to Bob wanting to learn. He's open-minded to speak to every single person that approaches him. And you don't find that with a whole bunch of people that are filling arenas of 20,000 people. So I think it's important for people to know that and what type of person Bob is. And the fact that he opens himself on stage and admits to everybody that, he's not perfect and he suffers with depression and anxiety. That's something special in him as well, because a lot of these motivational speakers would never, ever show that side of themselves. And I think that's what makes Bob special.
Well, thanks for sharing that, Kyle. And I'm in the same boat, and as many of you, like, I've suffered with bipolar disorder myself, and I've hit, rock bottom, especially, my first year of high school. And I really appreciate that Bob, able to share his personal, and that really is what changes people's lives, because other people hear Bob talking and they can say, well, you know what, I've been through that. That's happened to me. And, really, I think really it's changed people's lives.
Is Bob there?
Okay, let me see if I can get you back.
Hold on a sec.
Are you there?
We were just
Yeah,
saying
I
how
can.
great you are, Bob. We just could you turn on your video?
Where is that?
At the bottom of the screen, there you go.
All right. Welcome back, everyone.
There's the man. We thought you were doing a blackout tribute for like the Black Lives Matter for a second.
Bob missed all the time we were pumping him up. He missed it all.
Well, yeah, I don't need that. I'm okay.
I think.
Yeah, no,
you know
Bob,
what?
and we're just saying how much we appreciate your sharing your time and your wisdom with us, and how generous you are for doing that. And we certainly really appreciate your time today. And I think it's really great too what you and your family and your daughter's doing too, like changing people's lives ultimately, right? By holding up signs saying your life, the world's a better place with you in it. And I mean, and all of you done to help people with mental health and things, and be an awareness too of things like screen time and blue light and all the dangers of that. So we certainly appreciate all your knowledge and wisdom in that area.
Well, I think I kind of learned that when I was back in college. I had my first year kicking in college didn't go very well. And I ran into the punter of the Buffalo Bills, and he was all pro at the time. And he just out of the blue says, "Hey, I'm going to come pick you up every day, bring you to Buffalo Bills Stadium. I'm going to see what's going on with your kicking." And he just helped me 4 days in a row. And I'm going, why did he do that? And I just saw the generosity and the greatness of other people who helped me to move along all through my life. And I just thought that's what this is all about. We're all in this together. And it's like Kyle walking up. I mean, I see every person as absolutely divine and absolutely of tremendous worth, even if they can't see it in themselves. And he helped me to see that. And so I help others to see that too.
Now we're always, with the new normal that we're in, and people are a lot more isolated, especially those that are single or, seniors. Any ideas of what strategies that they can implement to improve their mental health? Anything you would suggest?
There's a great book called Lost Connections, and part of my healing was getting more connected with others, getting connected with myself, being able to reflect and be able to sit quietly with myself and look inside, connected with nature. The strategy would be, it's really interesting. My daughter said, "Geez, Dad, you've been teaching connection for 3 years, and now we're all separated." And that's one of the problems of creating all of this, this inner yuck that's going on, this depression, this anxiety. So it would be find someone. I mean, even elderly. I go visit 4 or 5 of my, people that are in their 80s, and one of them's 90. And I sit on the front lawn and I get connected with them and chat with them. And I'm far enough away from them that they're safe, no matter, even if I was infected, which I wasn't. And it's a two-way street. Go get connected to elderly or people around you that are alone, because being alone is not good for us.